In the quiet city of San Jose stands a mansion that has puzzled visitors for more than a century. Known as the Winchester Mystery House, the home is filled with staircases that lead to ceilings, doors that open to thin air, and hallways that seem to twist and turn without any purpose. The legend follows the tale of the mansion's owner, Sarah Winchester, who built the house this way to confuse the ghosts trapped inside, the very spirits who linger in her presence seeking revenge for her family's wrongdoings. For decades, that haunting story has followed her name. But when we step beyond the legend and look at the historical record, the life of Sarah Winchester begins to tell a very different story. I'm Johnny Clash, a dad, a gamer, a former pro wrestler, and a lifelong observer of the unexplained. I'm not here to convince or dismiss. I'm here to document, to listen, and to stay with questions that do not resolve neatly. This is Paranormal Unsettled. The story of Sarah Lockwood Winchester begins not with ghosts or curses, but with a woman shaped by wealth, tragedy, and the pressures of an inheritance. Born into privilege and later married to William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester repeating arms fortune, Sarah's life was marked by loss. By the time she inherited her wealth, she had already faced the death of her child and the sudden passing of her husband. In the midst of this grief and uncertainty, she purchased a small farmhouse in San Jose, California, intending to create a new home for herself. A home that would expand in ways that no one would predict. The mansion she began to build quickly became a labyrinth. From the outside, it appeared as though the house had no master plan, no guiding logic, yet each addition reflected decisions made by Sarah herself. Some say she was haunted by spirits, compelled to build endlessly. Others point to her personal grief, her obsessive attention to detail, and her desire for privacy as the driving force behind it. Or maybe she just needed the noise 24/7 to drown out the sounds from within. For more than a century, the focus has been on the supernatural. Sarah is a widow haunted by vengeful souls, endlessly building to ward off the dead. But the true story is far richer. It's a story of a woman navigating the pressures of wealth, the pain of loss, and the expectations of society. Sarah Winchester's legacy is a maze of history, myth, and misinterpretation. A common theme you're going to find in this season. And this is the legacy we will explore. The name Sarah Winchester has been inseparable from the strange mansion in San Jose, but to understand the legend, we must first understand the woman behind it. Born Sarah Lockwood Party in 1839, she came from a comfortable New Haven, Connecticut family. In 1862, she married William Wirt Winchester, try saying that 5 times fast, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the maker of one of the most successful lever-action rifles in American history. William Winchester was part of a firearms dynasty. The company founded by his father and great-uncle produced the Winchester rifle, a weapon that became iconic during the post-Civil War expansion westward. The success of the rifles made the Winchester family wealthy, and Sarah, as William's wife, became part of that wealth. But as we know, wealth does not always bring happiness. Sarah was struck by a series of personal tragedies that would change her life and her story forever. The couple had one daughter, Annie Party Winchester, who was born on June 15, 1866, and died within only 1 month from a disease called marasmus. When William died of tuberculosis in 1881 at the age of 43, Sarah inherited a substantial portion of the company's fortune and a steady income from its ongoing profits. These losses devastated Sarah and left her isolated and grieving, and searching for purpose in a world that had taken nearly everyone she loved. After the loss, Sarah's doctor recommended moving to a warmer climate to help her rheumatoid arthritis. It was in 1881, following yet another loss, This time her older sister Mary converse that Sarah and her sisters decided to pack up and move to San Jose, California. And that's when she first laid eyes on Lanata Villa, which would soon become her personal project, and by 1886, the mystery as we know it began to take shape. It's from this period of grief that the legend begins to blur into something less grounded. The story suggests Sarah became obsessed with spirits and the afterlife, seeking guidance on how to cope with her losses. Some versions of the story claim that she consulted mediums who told her that the deaths in her family were caused by spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and that she could escape her own tragedy only by continuously building a house for the dead. The mansion she began to build where a farmhouse once stood supposedly grew out of this belief. The purpose of the house would be to confuse and appease the spirits she feared were following her. Doors were built where there were no stairs, staircases that led to ceilings, windows facing other walls. These architectural oddities were deliberate attempts to thwart off malicious spirits, and it was done with over 10,000 panes of glass. Within the first 6 months of construction, Sarah Winchester's home had already grown to 26 rooms. Influenced by expositions she would attend and her personal tastes, she filled the house with intricate statues, patterned hardwood floors of teak and mahogany, embossed wall coverings, stenciled ceilings, German chandeliers, Asian furnishings, and French paintings. The surrounding gardens were equally elaborate, with plants sourced from over 110 countries. Although she hired architects, Sarah often took control of the project herself, supervising carpenters and managing each room's design. She subscribed to architectural journals and made detailed drawings of what she wanted. Rooms were built, torn down, or abandoned and rebuilt at her discretion, producing a sprawling maze-like layout. Some upper-level windows feature spiderweb tracery, and others incorporate Shakespearean quotes from Richard II or Troilus and Cressida. After 1896, Sarah added multiple stories in sections of the house, including a 7-story tower that was rebuilt 16 times before she was satisfied. She incorporated modern plumbing and electrical systems, an indoor garden with irrigation, and even an annunciator system to summon servants, which was one of the many new groundbreaking pieces of technology developed for this house. During this period of construction, yet another personal tragedy took place. In 1893, her youngest sister, Estelle Party Gerard, became gravely ill and was moved to the Lanata Villa property in hope that the drier climate would improve her health. Despite treatment from Winchester's personal physician, Gerard died in January of 1894 from cirrhosis, adding to the layers of grief and loss in Sarah Winchester's life that she seemed unable to escape. Over time, the story and the narrative behind Sarah Winchester and her reasoning expanded into ghost lore and rumors passed down. Sarah never stopped building, working day and night until her death in 1922, because the spirits would never let her rest. Workers were said to have been hired in shifts around the clock, and the sound of hammers and saws was reported day and night. In this way, Sarah was never alone. But the reality of her later years tells a different story, a more human one. As she aged, Sarah's health declined significantly. Severe arthritis left her hands and feet disfigured, making it difficult to walk or even write. She relied on assistance from her niece Daisy and a stenographer for correspondence, and later hired a trusted nurse and secretary, Henrietta Severa, who remained with her until the end. By the 1920s, Sarah rarely left her home, often shopping by mail or from her carriage rather than venturing out herself. And you can see in the one picture that exists of Sarah Winchester, she's in that very carriage. In September of 1922, she was moved closer to her doctor in San Jose. Days later, on September 5th, she passed away. She was laid to rest beside her husband and her daughter in New Haven. Her estate, though once rumored to be astronomically vast beyond measure, was valued at a more modest $3 to $4 million. In her will, she provided for her family and several loyal employees, leaving behind a legacy that was far more practical than the myths that would follow. After her death, most of her properties were sold off. The home itself, considered too unusual and in poor condition to be easily repurposed, was eventually opened to the public just months later, transforming from a private residence into a tourist attraction, and that's how it remains today. The Winchester Mystery House became a monument to spiritual fear. It wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. In the retellings that follow, Sarah Winchester is no longer a grieving widow who inherited wealth and chose to build an unusual home. She has become a ghost figure in her own story. A haunted woman driven by fear, trapped by voices, and forever linked to the spirits that folklore claimed she could neither escape nor appease.
We'll be right back after this commercial break.
By the early 20th century, long before horror movies or paranormal TV shows, the myth of Sarah Winchester as a crazy old woman had already taken root in pop culture. Newspapers and magazines covering the Winchester Mystery House focused less on architectural curiosity and more on Sarah herself. This portrayal was amplified in the mid-20th century as ghost stories and haunted lore grew. Headlines and show titles leaned into phrases like "the woman who built the house for ghosts," which could easily be taken as derogatory. These early articles laid the groundwork for a caricature that would persist for generations, one in which Sarah was not a grieving widow making unique personal choices, but a figure obsessed with life after death and somehow escaping it in her maze of a home. In 2018, Hollywood took interest in Sarah and her story. The film Winchester brought a new wave of interpretation to the tale, and a tale it was.
I feel their presence in the air, in the walls. It has found us.
Starring Helen Mirren as Sarah Winchester, the movie presented the story with the framework passed down for generations. Sarah, a mysterious widow, haunted by the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifles, compelled to build endlessly to keep them at bay. Until, of course, they couldn't be contained any longer. Though marketed as inspired by true events, the film leaned heavily on horror tropes with jump scares galore. This made for a dramatic movie that sits at a 5.5 on IMDb and a 12% on Rotten Tomatoes, but sits far outside the documented historical record. In the movie's version of events, Sarah suffered from nightmares and hallucinatory experiences tied to the deaths, as does her nephew. It uses typical horror movie scares like ghostly voice, warnings from spirits, and not to mention a possessed child. While Helen Mirren's performance is spectacular as usual, the story the film tells is one shaped by genre expectations. The grief Sarah experienced takes a far back seat and is only briefly mentioned in the story. Many people today encounter Sarah Winchester not as a historical figure, but as a character in a horror narrative, one who lost her mind, not one who lost just about everything else. And that, more than any architectural quirk of the mansion itself, is the cultural echo that still lingers. Now the truth. The real story of Sarah Winchester is less about ghosts and more so about a wealthy widow who faced immense personal loss and how one would react to it without the benefit of modern therapy or honest doctoring. As we saw with places like Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum last season, you can be locked up for just about anything, especially being a woman. Luckily, Sarah was powerful and wealthy, which in this sense helped her story. But all in all, Sarah Winchester was a grieving widow with determination and vision. Her legacy should be molded about architectural perseverance and overcoming such personal loss, not spiritual terror. The facts reveal a story of a human resilience and creativity more compelling than any ghost story could capture. Now, before we dive into reports of hauntings at the Winchester Mystery House, a quick note. Much like Ed and Lorraine Warren in the previous episode, I will be taking anything associated with Zach Baggins with a very, very large grain of salt and do not condone any alleged accusations against him. I also don't know how one man can be possessed so many times, but hey, it makes for good television, and the evidence still must be studied. Let's take a look at what evidence does exist out there in the Winchester house. Over the years, countless paranormal investigators have tried to document what the legend claims. The TAPS team from Ghost Hunters visited the mansion hoping to capture proof of the lingering spirits, or maybe even Sarah herself, though she did not die in the mansion. They recorded long hours of footage, even with electrical troubles, and searched the few rooms they were given access to. What did they find? Absolutely nothing. No apparitions, no mysterious sounds, no poltergeist activity, just the ability to free roam this historic building, learning about its curiosities and admiring the architecture. They even had to take their shoes off to enter the great ballroom. For all the reports of staircases to nowhere and doors that open on their own, the investigators came away empty-handed. In their episode, they admitted that the house itself, while fascinating, offered no evidence of supernatural forces. The split episode coverage with the Queen Mary made for an interesting contrast in locations, yet both appeared with minimal activity. You can find this episode in Season 2, Episode 11 on the Ghost Hunters official YouTube. Of course, with a house so popular, the investigations don't stop there, and progress as paranormal media did. Like I mentioned at the start of this segment, in Season 5, Episode 4, Zach Baggins and Ghost Adventures took on the Mystery House as well. In their investigation, the team set up cameras, audio equipment, thermal imaging devices, and EMF detectors throughout the mansion. They focused on areas tied to the legend of Sarah herself, including the beautiful Grand Ballroom, where she reportedly held seances to communicate with spirits, though that information is unverified. Throughout the night, they experienced doors slamming, strange noises, and unexplained shadows. In the Grand Ballroom, spikes in EMF readings suggested to the team that an unseen presence may have been communicating with them. The team also explored the cabinet room, which is said to be haunted by the spirit of a young girl. Using a laser grid and air pressure sensors, they recorded multiple disturbances of a pattern and sensed an unknown presence with them. In the basement, another site linked to Sarah's alleged communications with spirits, the investigators captured an EVP that sounded like a child saying hello, despite no children being present at the time of the investigation. Despite all of this, the team was unable to provide definitive proof of a haunting and concluded that while the mansion's bizarre layout and the tragic history of the Winchester family make it an incredibly unique and mysterious location, the evidence remained inconclusive. Now, YouTube is flooded with Winchester investigations. So actually, if you found this video, thank you. Hundreds of videos from visitors and popular YouTubers like Sam and Colby, Paranormal Quest, Mackie and Amanda, and Overnight by Elton Castee. But if you ask the people who actually work there, or have spent serious time in the mansion itself, some of the most frequently shared stories aren't from TV and YouTube, but from regular tours, maintenance crews, and longtime observers. One of the most commonly repeated experiences among staff and visitors is the presence of a figure nicknamed Clyde. Employees have described seeing a mustached man in the basement, often near the old fireplace or wheelbarrow, as if he's still tending to unfinished work. He is described as wearing Victorian work clothes, which has become a staple of the mansion's ghost lore. Though there's no historical record linking such a person to the house's actual construction, but with many workers and long hours, it's definitely possible. Other staff accounts include sudden cold spots and footsteps where no one is visible. But in a house so weird and a house so large, it could be anything. One longtime maintenance worker reported walking up through a restricted water tower only to hear footsteps directly above him. When he climbed to investigate, the sounds always remained one step ahead, even on floors and roof areas where no one should have been. Some tour guides have likewise said that the visitors occasionally feel light tugs on their clothing as they move through long hallways or near fireplaces, despite no one being nearby. Another well-circulated story comes from a former night watch couple who lived on the property during the 1970s and early 1980s. They described late-night alarm activations with no clear cause, odd movements sensed in the hallways, and a security dog that hesitated at certain corridors of the mansion. One of them also reported seeing movement out of the corner of his eye near a statue, a moment he described as unsettling enough that the chill stayed with him years later. While the evidence is enticing, many historians and skeptics point out that large, drafty Victorian houses commonly produce cold spots, creaks, and isolated noises due to settling wood, temperature shifts, or, the architectural quirks. And this house certainly has plenty of those. But the persistence of the stories, especially when shared over and over on YouTube and through word of mouth, keeps the ideas of haunting alive. Could there be something lingering? Is Sarah still present within those curved walls? Or could it be the mystique and the architecture coming to life? So is Sarah still haunting her old mansion? Nobody knows for sure, and we may never. What stays in this story is not a spirit, but the fascination with Sarah Winchester herself. And who is more vulnerable than a grieving widow to be spun into a narrative that she was crazy and spoke to ghosts? Maybe she simply had a love for architecture from all over the world. Maybe she wanted to build something so lavish and vast that her family, the tragedies she endured, and those who died before her would be remembered forever. The house was the monument. The truth is, Sarah was a well-educated woman who had every right to create whatever she wanted on her property with her own family's wealth. If there is something else still lingering on this property, perhaps they too are just shadows of the past. Echoes of a family, a house, and a story that will never be forgotten. Today, the Winchester Mystery House is more than just a legend. It's a destination. Visitors can walk its winding halls on guided tours, attend special events, even book weddings, or participate in paranormal investigations. For those who can't make it to San Jose, there's a virtual tour available for just $8.99 at 360tourwmh.com. This tour offers a detailed look at the mansion's unique rooms and history from anywhere in the world at your fingertips. Whether in person or online, the house continues to capture the imagination, reminding us that some stories linger not because of ghosts, but because of the lives, tragedies, and mysteries that shape them. The Winchester Mystery House stands as a testament to Sarah Winchester, her vision, her grief, and the enduring fascination that surrounds her name. May Sarah and her family rest in peace, and whatever lingers here be nothing more than a reminder of a life lived, a home built, and stories that continue to captivate us without causing harm. In the next episode, we step into the misty forests and early settlements of colonial Maryland, where fear and superstition shaped daily life and grief could be mistaken for malevolence. We'll explore the life of Maud Dyer, a woman whose choices were misunderstood, whose struggles became a legend, and whose story reminds us that history often blurs the lines between fact and folklore. I'm Johnny Clash, and this is Paranormal Unsettled.
Paranormal Unsettled is written and produced by Johnny Clash. Want more unsettling content? Subscribe to Johnny Clash XP on YouTube and Paranormal Unsettled on TikTok. For gaming content, follow on Twitch and social media at Johnny FN Clash.